Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later, as now it's time for a brand new unboxing video. And boy, does it feel like only yesterday that we were taking a look at the last member of the Ocular Max Combaticon team, yet already here we are again with another. But hey, I'm not complaining, as the set seems to be shaping up really nicely so far, and besides, I'm beginning to accept that if third parties keep making Masterpiece-style Combaticons, I'm going to keep wanting them. I don't make the rules. So with that in mind, let's get cracking and take a look at Ocular Max Impetus. PS-12 Impetus is one part of the Ocular Max Combaticon team and represents the unmistakable form of the maniacal interrogator known as Vortex. As the first member of the team to be released, the general feedback on Impetus seems to be pretty positive overall, but of course I'm keen to make up my own mind now that I have him in hand. The big draw with this team overall is that they feature an all-in-one transformation, meaning that there is no parts forming whatsoever, not even when making the combine mode. Bits such as hands and feet and all of the usual combiner gumph are all built into the toys themselves, so it'll be interesting to see the final result. It's also fair to say that both Impetus and Fraudo have proven themselves so far, with their transformations being fun but still somewhat surprising, so I can't wait to see how Impetus shapes up. Of course, we've previously seen the Combaticons done many times over, although arguably one of the first true Masterpiece-styled attempts was from Unique Toys a few years back, with their individual figures and the combine mode all packing quite the punch. Then there's the much-lauded Zeta Toys set, which is a true behemoth in its combined form, standing at an impressive 50 centimeters tall. It's kind of the opposite to the Ocular Max crew in that it relies heavily on parts forming and a number of fake parts to achieve the end result. So there's arguably still room left on the table for Ocular Max to bring their own unique take to this team, and I'm more excited than ever to see the result. That's especially true as they seem to be doing a fine job at representing the Combaticons as we know them from the original Sunbow cartoon. Last thing before we begin, today's video comes courtesy of TF Source, so I'll put a link to their site in the video description. The plan for today is to give you my first impressions, and then I'll be getting a full review up on their blog ASAP. Okay, and here is Impetus in his packaging, and just like the others that we've looked at recently, it looks fabulous. Really, really like it. Love this artwork. This is very nice artwork on the front here, and all of the team look cracking in the artwork that I've seen so far. Really strange that it's back to window design for this one, just like in Impetus. But it makes me feel that that Fraudo, which we looked at in another review just recently, that's strange by comparison for not having the window and for being packaged in its robot mode, whereas this is back to vehicle mode, which you can see through the window just there. So, I mean, not a problem at all, just a slight bit of inconsistency in the packaging. So, hey ho. Back of the box is looking equally nice, with Impetus there transforming, showing you the all-in-one transformation. That I'm certainly very much looking forward to checking out. I've enjoyed it with the two that we've looked at so far. And that all built-in logo just here, letting you know that there is 0 parts forming for this set. So that's exciting. And then you've got the tech spec, which if you're not familiar with them, harkens back to the days of yore from Generation 1. So that looks pretty cool too. Seriously though, how gorgeous is this artwork? Just lovely. If the toy is half as handsome, then I'll be a happy camper. Right, well, let's crack on and get that box open, shall we? There he is. Right, there's the main clamshell with the toy in question, all sealed within, and the rotor blades, which look like they need to be attached separately, so we'll get to that in just a second. And then we've got this little baggie with the instructions in just there, as well as the character card and this red tech spec decoder, which is another Generation 1 throwback nod. Small little baggie of weapons as well, so we'll check that out. First things first, let's get them out the clamshell. Ta-da! Right, so this is everything that you get in the box with Impetus. You've got the toy itself in helicopter mode, rotor blades, which will fit in just a minute, 3 guns, 2 of which are smaller, tech spec decoder, character card, and of course the instructions. And the instructions look to be on point and following what we've already seen from this team so far, so I'm really looking forward to checking out that transformation in just a bit. Yeah, the biggest gun of the 3 looks nice and blue, and then these are the 2 smaller guns, which of course fit on his helicopter mode, as we'll see. Rotor blades look pretty swish, pun very much intended. And then you've got the main toy himself, which on a cursory examination looks pretty nice. So we'll go ahead and get him assembled, shall we? Well, the first thing you've got to do is transform up this tail section properly, which isn't explained in the instructions, but it really doesn't look hard to do, so I'm sure that's not a problem. Just flip this bit up, flip this section back, flip this panel over, and then flip this whole section there to match. Tab it in. Right, well now we're going to sort out these rear blades, so just press this little piece out like that, and then this should rotate up like that. Fold down the rear fins, and then hey presto, you're done. In my head that was going to spin a little bit more magnificently. Right, so now we'll go ahead and just plug the main rotor blades onto the top there. That clips in very easily, and I think can be removed if you need. Then it's just a matter of rotating those round, like so, and they do kind of nudge into position, which is nice. And then each of these blades just pulls out slightly like so. Well, I just had this little translucent window section fall out as I was doing the rotor blades there. That's kind of annoying. It does just pop right back in, but I think I'll need to glue it. This last rotor blade is very stiff, really stiff. There we go, got it. But yeah, had to pull on that quite hard, and they're not the thickest, so I did get slightly nervous. Yeah, that window piece has fallen out again. Gonna need some glue. Oh, I love gluing my new third-party toys. Let's put that back in, like so. Just hold it for a second. Hopefully that'll stay in place now. Job's a good un. Job is a good un. Well, the next thing to do to check him out in vehicle mode is to get that landing gear on the go. So it just pulls out like that. And then there's the back piece just there. We're getting there, folks. Let's put some guns on him. Right, so the side guns just peg into these little holes on the side, like so. And this other gun can go in on his nose cone, but we'll take a look at that in just a second. And here he is, all prepped up and in his vehicle mode. And you know what? First impressions, it looks really nice, really cool. I really like it. Colors are good, really nice, kind of warmish grey. A little bit of a kind of more colourful grey, if there is such a thing, than I might have anticipated. And then with a really lovely little blue section just here, and obviously the guns on the sides, which add a little bit of visual interest. So that looks nice. And the overall shape of him and the proportions and everything just make a very striking first impression. He looks great. I mean, look, I can't in any good conscience claim to be even approaching being an expert on these kinds of military helicopters. But, you know, to my eye, it looks really nice. There's some lovely details going on. And overall, I think this is the closest I've seen as a representation of Vortex in his vehicle mode. You know, looking like the cartoon anyway. We'll compare him to some of the other toys a little bit later in robot mode, but certainly in vehicle mode, this, to my eye, looks like I always imagine that helicopter mode of Vortex is looking. So it's a really striking first impression. Generally speaking, it feels pretty nice quality as well, certainly on par with the other 2 Ocular Max Combaticons that I've had in hand so far, so that's really good. We'll do, again, a quick comparison of those in a little bit. But yeah, overall first impression is nice. And you know, that window popping out, I really don't hold that against them. That's something that you get on even official toys. So as much as I'm making a joke of it, it's not really a big problem in my eyes. But lots of lovely little details here as well. Some really nice molded detail, really nice sculpting. And actually looks tidier than Fraudo, I will say, that we looked at just the other day. And this presents better, I think, in vehicle mode. So let's take him for a spin. Yeah, that could have been a little bit more impressive. You spin me right round, baby, right round. Joking aside, the spin on those rotor blades is not the best. It's a little bit wobbly, it's fair to say. They don't spin that magnificently. And the same is certainly true of the rear set, which is a little bit duff, to be honest, but hey. And if spinning's not your thing, how about rolling? Well, I have kind of alluded to this already, but there's a definite feeling that these rotor blades are a little bit flimsy. And I don't know, they do move a lot, and the plastic is quite pliable, which is fine. But I would worry a little bit about stress marks on those, to be honest. I'm going to be taking extra care of mine just to make sure that they stay looking nice. But I would imagine that there'll be one or two people that might have unhappy accidents along the way if they're not careful. And the same is true on these rear blades too. These feel very soft and almost pliable in hand. Yeah, I would watch out for stress marks on those, definitely. Maybe just be a bit careful with the arms that the landing gear are on too, eh? Fortunately, more than makes up for it with some beautiful little details in hand. Really love this effect of this translucent plastic here on these windows. That looks really fabulous. Catches the light very, very nicely indeed. And I like the really minute detail on these, I don't know, do you call them rear view mirrors on a helicopter? I'm not really up on the old terminology. I'm sure someone can tell me maybe in the comments, but if indeed they are rear view mirrors, they look good. Also worth mentioning the little silver trim that they've got going on around these window sections, which looks fantastic. Really, really tiny detail, but just makes such a difference in hand, like here as well. And also really love this molding that's on this section just here. It's just those little touches that just elevate this guy. It's appreciated. Really nice little black, again, are they intakes? I don't know if they're intakes, but they look cool. Really nice little black sections just here. I really like the kind of curved section that the rotor blades are mounted on top of. That's really nicely, the way it's kind of curved and molded, it looks really, really nice in hand. That's really, really great. And indeed, the detail on the rotor blades themselves looks nothing shy of fantastic. That looks really, really very striking. In fact, there's lots of little molded touches all over this guy. These sections look like actual doors, which is really, really cool. So you can really buy into this being a real world helicopter. Really dig this kind of electric blue color that they've got on the nose cone just there. Contrasts really well with the gray and it just looks really superb in hand. Catches the light nicely. And the underneath looks relatively tidy. This robot mode head, that's clearly the robot mode head in there, just looks slightly out of place. That's how it came in the box, so that looks a little bit messy. But overall, you know, for an underneath of a vehicle mode like this, it cleans up quite well. Well, that's all true anyway, apart from the tail section just here, which does have this huge hollow section when you look at it from the underneath. And that does look a little bit messy and unfortunate. I kind of feel like they maybe could have covered that a little bit better. Right, and it's probably time to connect this gun onto the front of the nose cone, isn't it? Right, and they don't actually explain this in the instructions, because why would they? But apparently this front section here, the actual tip of the nose cone, is supposed to fold down to allow you to fit the gun inside. I'm having a bit of difficulty with it, so I've just unpegged him to try and give it another go. Man, this is tight. Does not want to budge. Really, really tight, that is. Right, well, I got it in the end. But yeah, just couldn't get it out, which is very strange. I had to use a bit of a tool in the end just to help me kind of actually move the thing out of its sort of resting place. But it seems to have loosened off, and there's a screw on the inside of either piece, so I'm sure you can adjust it after you've done it the first time. Anyway, once you've got it out, it's just a relatively simple process of plugging this gun in the front there. I will say it doesn't feel like it's sitting very tight though. I have tried squeezing both these sides together to kind of, you know, make a bit more friction, but still it's very loose and wobbly. And that's how it looks once it's actually installed. And yeah, I don't know. For all that effort, I'm a little bit underwhelmed actually, I'm going to be honest. I kind of expected it to maybe look a little bit more magnificent. I don't know if I'm going to be using that a whole bunch, to be completely honest. It's a little nod. The G1 toy did something similar. It's fun, I guess, but yeah, for the effort involved, the execution isn't quite there. Still, overall, as vehicle modes go, this is a really nice one. So I'm really not going to nitpick too much because overall, yeah, I'm very enamored with this guy so far. I think he presents really nicely. I mentioned it already, but really dig the colors, really dig the overall sculpt. He looks good. It's a win. Right, well now it's time to do a few vehicle mode comparisons, see how he shapes up. And the first is with Make Toys Skycrow, which of course is their take on Skywarp. So this is actually the same size as the MP11 mold in both, interestingly, vehicle and robot mode. We'll have to see how the new Seeker mold, which hopefully we'll see properly unveiled soon, how that shapes up. But for today, we've got the Make Toys effort. And you know what? Real world vehicle mode scale is never really going to be a thing with these kinds of releases. But hey, I still think these guys look pretty good together, actually. It works to my eye. I've no doubt that's not the right size that a helicopter should be versus a jet of this kind, but you know what, it works. But maybe you'd rather see another combiner limb in aerial vehicle mode. So here is Fans Toys Goose. which of course is their skydive. A really nice jet mode with this one. Interesting to see though, because the Fans Toys Aerobots really are quite huge. They're big toys, and actually, you know, the Ocular Max effort here doesn't look undersized at all, or you know, very small. It shapes up to be quite big in vehicle mode, as you can probably see. If you have those Fans Toys Aerobots, you'll know what I'm talking about. And yeah, the Ocular Max effort here is you know, a decent size. But let's bring in a couple of Earth modes now, and here is KFC Ditka, or at least the first test shot of him. I like showing this one off. You may have seen it in a few recent videos, just because I like the color and I think it's much nicer than the retail release that we eventually got. But hey, but yeah, here he is versus, you know, in tank mode. Be interesting to see how Brawl, their what's he called, Probus, will shape up when that's eventually released, because that looks to be fairly sizable too. But for now, you can check him out versus KFC Ditka. And finally, here he is versus a couple of Masterpiece cars, Masterpiece Carbots. So you have Masterpiece Blue Streak and Masterpiece Sideswipe, or at least the plus versions of them. And there you go. Yeah, I mean, that's, again, he would be significantly bigger, obviously, you know, Vortex, if it was all real world vehicle mode scale. But you know, it's still a debate I find online a lot about vehicle mode scale in the Masterpiece line. And, you know, I always say it's just never going to be a thing. Robot mode scale is where it's at. That's ultimately how all of these toys are designed to line up, and vehicle mode scale falls where it may. And, you know, yes, it's nice when it kind of by happenstance happens to kind of line up, but it rarely does. So that's what you get. But, you know, I still think they look pretty good together. Okay, well now it's time to check out the transformation, and the instructions have you going from vehicle to robot mode first, so that's what we're going to do. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how this one shapes up. I've enjoyed the other two, you know, figures in this set in terms of their transformations, so can't wait to give it a go. All right, and here is Impetus in his robot mode. And the transformation was actually kind of fun. I enjoyed it. Some really clever parts, as with the other Ocular Max guys as well. Particularly, you know, when you can probably see during the transformation there where the hand for the combined mode appears in the legs. And that's really interesting. Obviously, the hand is in two pieces with one half in either leg, and then we'll see how that comes together in just a little bit. But that was quite interesting to see how it all kind of span around. I guess the highlight for me is seeing that actually this was a much easier conversion than the Unique Toys Vortex, which has always been a bit of a chore to transform, to be honest. I mean, that's, you know, whether that's into combined mode or vehicle mode or robot mode or whatever, whichever way you choose to go with that toy, it just seems to be quite the pain in the bum. And actually, by comparison, this was really fluid, a lot more intuitive at times, a lot more, you know, just kind of bits snapping together, easier. Didn't give you quite the same pain in the old fingers and the wear on the fingernails that toy does as well. So, you know, for my part, just straight off the bat, if you're looking for a kind of Masterpiece styled Vortex alone, this is more fun to transform, definitely. And he cleans up pretty nicely overall. I mean, I was interested to see this guy in his robot mode because from the photos that I'd seen, I had a bit of a kind of concern about some of the proportions, particularly around this waist section, which always looked a little bit awkward to me. I don't know, we'll get him posed up in just a minute, but just glaring at him right now, actually looks pretty good in robot mode, have to say. Quite liking it. And, you know, generally pretty clean robot mode all round. Even the backpack, all of that, you know, condenses down quite nicely. I did take the rotor blades off for transformation. You don't have to, you can leave them on, you know, so if you are particularly, if you find parts forming particularly egregious, then by all means leave them on and that's fine. I just think you're going to have an easier time transforming him by taking them off, that's all. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, those rotor blades to me just look a tiny bit on the thin side. So for me personally, I think it's easier to take them off and avoid any potential problems. But yeah, certainly he cleans up pretty nicely with or without the rotor blades. We'll put them back on in just a minute. One thing that is a little bit of a pain during transformation is the head, which pops off quite a lot. I mean, you know, it happened to me, I think 3 or 4 times during the whole thing. And seemingly it does just pop off on a little ball joint. And it, you know, reattaches quite easily as well, but slightly annoying, not a big deal really. So, okay, so let's go ahead and get him all accessoried up. Right, so we're going to need these little side guns from the vehicle mode, which in robot mode just tab quite securely into the sides of his arms. Then of course you've got his main weapon, which plugged into the front of the copter, and just slide out that handle there. And then that now tabs fairly neatly, he says, into the palm of his hand. And you can just kind of wrap the fingers around it like so. That's not too difficult to do. Then you can go ahead and reattach the rotor blades. So first things first is to shrink them back down, being careful of course, and then just plug it right back into his backpack that's just there. And then there you have the finished look, complete with all his guns, rotor blades, everything all in place. And yeah, I have to say, he looks pretty marvelous. I mean, I'm a big fan of Vortex's cartoon design for one reason or another. I'm not quite sure why, but it always just spoke to me. And this guy looks really, really the part, I can say that. Recalls the animation very nicely indeed, and just generally brings the character to life in a way that I don't think we've seen so far. Even from the Unique Toys version, which I do like a lot, particularly the head sculpt on that guy. But I think, you know, first impressions wise, Ocular Max definitely looks the part. It might have it beat. So, and yeah, I think a big part of that is the head sculpt, which is, I mean, it's really, really magnificent actually. They've really done it justice. I mean, look, it's one of those where it's a single visor and a mouth plate, so there's not a lot of expression involved. But these kind of head sculpts should always look cool, but somehow they still manage to get botched from time to time. And but you know, Ocular Max have done a great job with it. I do think the legs are a little bit messy. I've got to be honest. I mean, it's there's just a lot of joins, you know, particularly around here, that are quite visible. The way this ankle tilt works, I mean, we'll take a look at the articulation in just a minute, but that looks slightly awkward with this kind of visual break on the side just there. It's not a huge deal breaker by any means, but yeah, it's very visible. And then if you come around to this side, you'll see that there's just that kind of obvious combiner mode hand inside there. There's nothing to kind of cover this section. And even then, these tabs don't really, these panels don't really tab in particularly well. I mean, they do, that one does. On this side, less so actually. It just kind of sits in place without really tabbing. So I don't know. It's not bad by any means. It's just not the tidiest. Otherwise, you know, he cleans up pretty nicely. And I really like the kind of curved, clean look of this chest. That looks really nice. And even the arms, which do have a little bit of vehicle mode cable just on the side, actually look pretty good overall. Okay, well, let's take a look at some articulation now. And in terms of the head, it's a really good range of motion there, and he can look up and down pretty convincingly too, so that's good. Shoulders have decent range, 90 degrees definitely, and then there's a separate joint to have them move back and forth. And a decent bend at the elbow, and a bicep swivel as well. Decent amount of wrist swivel, it's quite tight on there, but it works. And then the hands are actually separate pieces for each of the fingers. They are tight, and they're molded. They're kind of, you can't articulate at the fingers themselves, just at the knuckle here, but each of the fingers is an independent piece, and then the thumb is just on a little ball joint. That's quite tight too, but it's there. There is a waist swivel, and because of the nature of the transformation, a very generous ab crunch as well. Now the hips are kind of unusual, because firstly the hip skirt here is actually tabbed slightly in place, but you just need to move it out of the way to get the full clearance. And then the hips have a really decent range of motion, but they're actually on a double joint. So they move in two places, which is really unusual, really, really weird. I've not really seen that before. And then quite a decent ratchet and 90 degrees upwards. As for the knees, they will go, quite decent, a little bit over 90. And probably could go further, but they're just impeded by the back of the legs there. And then, as I mentioned, there is ankle tilt, but it's a little bit above the ankle actually, which is here. It's slightly up here, and it kind of has this visual break in the leg, as I mentioned. And it's not very generous actually. It doesn't really want to go very far. I mean, it's enough for a slightly wide-legged stance, kind of power stance, if you will. Yeah, you're not going to get a lot out of that, certainly for more extreme poses, and that's just because of the combined mode hand that's inside there. But should you wish, there's a little bit of toe articulation too. And posing this toy has been a real test for me of how good he is actually, because I will say that some of the pictures I'd seen prior to having him in hand just made him look quite awkward in terms of, as I say, the proportions, just where some of the joints were placed as well, that just he had a kind of slightly unnatural look to him. Maybe that's the proportions again, I don't know. It's really hard to kind of put my finger on. But actually posing him up in hand is quite good fun. He's pretty lithe. There are a lot of joints. There's a decent amount of articulation overall, and some spots that really kind of are quite generous in terms of how they allow you to pose him. So that's really, really nice. And actually I do find that actually just, having my hands on him and being able to kind of contort him a bit myself, I feel like he comes off better in hand than he does in some of the pictures I've seen anyway. It'll be interesting to get him in front of a camera properly and take some of my own photos and see how he fares. But first impressions are, yeah, he's quite a bit of fun to pose. That said, there are some awkward parts to him. Yeah, he does come across as being maybe a little bit fiddly overall, particularly again these legs, which just have kind of multiple joints. I do find that these panels on the inside come untabbed or move out of place a little bit too easily for my taste. And actually, because of the design of the joint just here at the knee, that can kind of come a bit untabbed as well. If you're not careful, you might have to kind of put that back together a little bit. The hip panels, I mean, I think I mention this every time there's hip panels in a review, but they just look a bit awkward in certain poses. Very difficult to kind of display the hips really at any angle without having to flare out the hip panels. And it creates that kind of visual break from the robot mode that maybe I'm not so keen on. I do find that there's just a kind of a lot going on visually, whereas that upper body is quite smooth. Then here on top of the body, you've got a kind of, the screws and things like that maybe visually just detract a little bit. So, overall, he's quite a visually busy robot. But, still, maybe the uniform color, the splashes of blue, that helps to counteract it a little bit. But you know what? You do get a pretty decent run out of him, so that's certainly something. So overall, I really, really dig him. Perhaps my only final grumble is that this head just pops off way too much. In fact, I don't think I've posed him once without the head coming off. At least a couple of times. It just seems to pop off constantly. But again, it pops back in pretty easily. So it's not a major complaint by any means. Right, well, we're going to go ahead and do some comparisons in robot mode anyway. And perhaps the most obvious set of toys to compare him to right off the bat is the rest of the Ocular Max gang. So here is Fraudo, and here is, rather massively as he is, Impetus. And that's my assembled squad so far. I've got the other The other's on the way. But yeah, you get the idea. The team's coming together, which is looking pretty good so far. Interesting to see how they're all different heights. Fraudo already looking a little bit smaller than Impetus overall, and you get the same thing again, particularly with Probus, their brawl, which looks to be quite noticeably larger actually than the other 3 limbs. So that'll be really interesting to see when they're all assembled. But overall so far, it's shaping up really, really nicely, and I do think, I've said it a couple of times already, but I do think that Ocular Max, generally speaking, are doing a good job bringing these characters to life as we know them from the Sumbo cartoon. I think they look fantastic together, and I'm really excited to get the final 2 team members. In the meantime, though, we've got plenty of other Decepticons to compare them to. So here is Masterpiece Shockwave, or Laser Wave if you prefer, and Make Toys Meteor, just there. And let's go ahead and stick in Masterpiece Megatron as well, just on the end there. And it kind of gives you a good idea. These are all characters that, of course, Vortex interacts with at various times in the cartoon, so interesting to see how they shape up. Of course, Meteor is a third-party figure, but we have the new official Masterpiece Starscream on the way. The prototype's just been seen, so that'll be interesting to see one day soon too. But for now, you know what, I think they look really good actually. Colours-wise, it all lines up really nicely. This guy has this kind of warmish grey and the blue that looks quite cartoony actually, so I think they do a good job at sort of blending in together pretty well. I think the cartoony looks on Impetus is really good, and this is a good job. Of course, maybe you prefer a futuristic Decepticon lineup, in which case here's Fans Toys Sovereign and Fans Toys Quietus. I do remember all of these names on the fly, you know. I'm sure I'm going to get one wrong eventually. Anyway, that looks pretty good to my kind of futuristic lineup, because Vortex can fit into both. Well, let's check him out versus a few other Masterpiece bots. Here he is with Masterpiece Prowl, Masterpiece Smokescreen. There we go. And let's have Masterpiece Hound just there as well, so you can see. And he, he's quite tall actually. He's noticeably taller than your average car bot, and definitely taller than the likes of little Bumblebee just there on the end once you pop him in. And it's interesting again to see the different sizes of these Combaticons. But in a way, I was surprised that Fraudo was as tall as he is. But with Impetus, I don't know, it kind of makes sense in my eye for him to be a bit larger. So I really think that works quite nicely. And now let's see how he looks versus some other third-party combiner limbs. So here is Fans Toys Magnum and Fans Toys Spoiler, which is their 2 Stunticons so far outside of Motormaster, who are both very large, very tall guys. Somewhat, even taller than Impetus, which is interesting to see, although they don't shape up badly. Of course, you maybe prefer the X-Transbots set. So here is X-Transbots Overheat and X-Transbots Death Wish. There you go. So an interesting look into the Stunticon lineup at different sizes, but really it's up to you, whichever one works best with Impetus, which of course is the focus for today. And here's a bit of a fun one for you. This is just out of interest more than anything, but here it is with Wei Jiang Hide Shadow, which of course is an oversized KO actually of the studio series Blackout. And of course, yes, it's a Bayformer, so these 2 characters are never going to stand side by side in terms of fiction. Well, at least I don't think so, short of some sort of multiverse type thing. But I've always felt that Blackout's design has a very kind of vortexy feel to it in a Bayformer's sense anyway. So at least for my own curiosity, it's interesting to see them side by side. I really love this toy. And also, just out of curiosity, here he is with a couple of the other Combaticons. But these are some of the Unique Toys versions. So here you have Unique Toys Blastoff and Unique Toys Brawl. Their names I can't remember, so don't hold that against me. But yeah, it's interesting to see. And actually Impetus, again, shapes up to be quite a bit taller. Well, I say quite a bit, noticeably taller, certainly when you look at them dead on in terms of head height. So that's interesting to see. I really can't wait now for Ocular Max's Brawl. I've always loved this toy a lot, but I do think that the Ocular Max version looks way better. And the blast off is certainly more cartoon accurate as well, so it'll be interesting to see when we've got the full team. Of course, the real comparison for the day is with the other Vortex options on the market. So here you have, let's get them all posed up, here you have the Unique Toys version and the Zeta Toys version just here. All looking quite different, but yeah, these are, well, certainly for my money, the three main challenges when it comes to a Masterpiece style Vortex currently. And my word, it's fair to say they're all very, very different, all do different things completely. I mean, up until now, I've been really happy with the Unique Toys Vortex in my collection, and I do still really like it. There's a lot that I like about it. The head sculpt I've always felt is really, really strong. And yes, it's not entirely cartoon accurate, but you know, it's one of those that, in terms of third-party combiners, that, you know, it's close enough and it does the job quite well. In terms of getting you there. This guy, by comparison, is not one that if I'm honest, I ever really spend much time with in robot mode. He and the rest of the Zeta set tend to spend their days sitting in the combined form, because I really think the combined form is quite spectacular. This is the kind of more cartoony set. They did originally release a very different one, and this had a lot more purple on it and what have you, the original version. But then they did this one, which is, I say it's more cartoon accurate, the colours are more cartoon accurate, I should say. And then of course you have the Ocular Max, which is the new version, and it's very different again. I would say Ocular Max hits the cartoon look way harder overall, way harder. The face sculpt is the best of the three, to my eye, and the overall look is very strong, and does really kind of bring the animation model to life in a way that even the Unique Toys one, you know, is an approximation, but that's as far as it goes. So Ocular Max from that perspective is definitely the winner. I do think it's interesting to see the very different color that they've got on Ocular Max. A much warmer gray, darker, warmer gray than the other two, which are actually quite close in terms of shade. I mean, this is definitely the lightest overall, and then this guy, and then Ocular Max is definitely the outlier in that regard. And I don't know, I'm struggling to decide which I like the most. I think actually I probably prefer one of the other two on the right, as although I don't dislike the warmer grey on Ocular Max, there's just something nice and clean about the look on the other two. Is the warmer grey more cartoon accurate? Ooh, I don't know. I'd need to think about that and look at some screenshots, I guess. I mean, again, it's not bad by any means, and I do like it, but there's just something maybe a bit cleaner about the other two. But you know what? Overall, for me, I think the Ocular Max guy takes it. I think he's definitely the best looking toy of the three, for sure. So, you know, my final thoughts on this robot mode overall are that I really like it. I mean, it's not perfect by any means. Proportionally, there are a couple of quirks. Design-wise, there are a couple of oddities too. You know, the way that things clip together, particularly in the legs, isn't entirely solid and does require a bit of readjustment occasionally. But still, he's a lot of fun. And in terms of the overall look, they've definitely nailed the character in that regard. Well, the last thing that we're going to do for today is take a look at the second transformation, which of course goes from robot mode into his combined arm mode. So let's check that out. Right, well, here we go. He's all transformed up into arm mode. And in terms of transformation, that was smooth overall, I guess. I mean, again, way easier than the Unique Toys Vortex, getting him into arm mode. But still a couple of bits that were a little bit fiddly, to say the least. I do appreciate the way this rear tail section transforms, because they've obviously shrunk it slightly by not having the whole tail fin go out the full way as it would in helicopter mode. So it looks slightly shrunken for the combined mode, which, you know, is an attempt to make it slightly more cartoon accurate, because that's what Bruticus's cartoon model looks like. However, the process of getting it there is just a tiny bit fiddly, and then actually assembling this whole piece, including this bit on the top, nothing really seems to want to stay quite where it's supposed to. So it is a little bit frustrating, because you end up retabbing stuff a couple of times over, to say the least. Do like the way that the hand is formed. That's really clever. The two sort of pieces coming together really reminded me of the way that the head is formed in Fans Hobby God Armor. And that obviously comes together from two pieces and then still has articulation. This is similar in terms of the principle, and then the thumb obviously comes out of one of the two pieces. But we'll take a look at the hand in more detail in just a minute. Then there's this piece in the middle, just here. The legs actually come together quite nicely, but there's a small section just here that doesn't seem to want to tab as it's supposed to, and I found that quite frustrating so far. And it's all to do with this midsection. Now, firstly, this piece pops out of the chest, the robot mode chest, which of course will be the piece that combines with Impetus, but we'll look at that another day when we've got all the figures assembled and we'll do the combined form. But then there's a piece just inside here, just on the underneath, which is like a small flap that's supposed to lie like that and connect with the landing gear to sort of hold it in place. And the idea of that is to lock this sort of body section in place so that the whole thing can't do that and wobble. And it doesn't really work, to be honest. I mean, even when you try and apply a bit of pressure to it, the landing gear just pops out, or it just comes out all of its own inside the body. So yeah, it's not very successful. It's literally this small grey tab just in there. It's supposed to just push down and then connect with the landing gear, but it just doesn't work. Yeah, press it in, and yeah, it's popped out. And press it in, and it's popped out. So I don't know, maybe I'm doing something wrong, but it doesn't seem to want to hold. Ultimately, I'm not going to worry about it too much. And you know, you do still have a bit of bicep swivel due to it's actually the waist swivel in the robot mode, individual robot mode. So, you know, maybe it just allows for a bit of extra movement. I do think that this front section tabs together quite securely, so that's good. And then you've got quite a nice ratchet at the combiner elbow as well. So that looks pretty good, actually. Quite a big fan of the combined mode hand. I think it looks really good. I mean, it's not particularly stylized or anything, but considering it was built out of two pieces, it comes together quite nicely. You don't get much wrist swivel with it. That's about as far as it goes back. But I don't know, do you need more than that? Maybe not. And it does go a decent amount the other way. Each of the fingers is individually articulated too, so that's good. And then you've got the thumb, which is a slight bit of an oddity, because it moves up and down on a ball joint just there, and it's got a little hinge like that as well. But then the thumb joint itself kind of bends at a weird angle for where this ball joint is. I don't know, it just doesn't look particularly natural. It kind of bends the wrong way to my eye. But maybe I just need to get a bit creative with it. Ultimately, it all comes together pretty nicely. And, you know, in terms of being a combined mode arm, well, I'll reserve final judgment for when we've got the full Assaultus mode together. But it looks decent. It looks pretty decent. I'm excited for the full thing. I can't wait to see it when it's all combined together. So final thoughts on Impetus overall are that he's good. Definitely quite fiddly, and there are definitely some quirks in the design overall. Arguably more so than Incursus and probably even Fraudo, actually. You know, just a couple of bits that I do think, as I say, are a bit fiddly, maybe don't quite work as well as they're intended. But overall, it comes together quite nicely. And it looks really, really good in all modes. The vehicle mode is definitely a win for me. The bot mode, whilst yes, it does have its quirks, I do like. I think they've nailed the look. And the arm mode, well, as I say, we'll reserve judgment for where we've got it all together, but first impressions are that it's pretty good. And the transformation between all three modes is is quite good fun as well overall. There's nothing too taxing there. And definitely he's easier to transform than Unique Toys Vortex, so that's something at least. So overall, I'm going to say it's a toot. So that's Ocular Max Impetus. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm working my way through the rest of this team, so keep an eye on the channel for more unboxing videos to come. I'll also put the link to TF Source's Ocular Max listings in the video description, and I'll be aiming to get the full review and loads of photos of Impetus up on their blog ASAP. So thanks again for watching, and if you haven't yet, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and there's a quick shout out for all my Patreon subscribers coming up at the end of the video as well. Otherwise, that's it from me, so enjoy the rest of your day. TTFN.